Hi there, thanks for stopping by. In today's video, I am working to a special request, how to work the Swanston button. This lovely button with a beautiful swirl was designed by Marion Howitt in 1985. So let's get started. So the button that we're going to look at today is one called the Swanston. It's a lovely swirly pattern which I'm sure many of you have seen, and I've had a lot of requests on how to make this. So a little bit of background. This button was designed by Marion Howitt in 1985. Marion Howitt is someone who we have a lot to be grateful for in the button making world. She really was instrumental in reviving button making back before the internet, and then continuing it on during the internet. And little bits of trivia for you, she made an awful lot of Dorset buttons for the Harry Potter films. So, because it's a complicated button, I'm going to work on a big ring using fat thread. So I've got a DK weight cotton. So I'll just show you the basics to get started on actually covering the ring in case you're new to button making. So you can tie the end to your ring. That's fine. A lot of people prefer to do this, so I will do that in this instance. I tend to hold it and then cover the end. But either way, it doesn't matter. We're still going to cover the end of thread. So it's just tied on. So if you're working with a smaller ring, you can do that. And then what you're going to do is take your thread through the center of the loop of the ring and come up through that loop, which I probably didn't show very well. So let's try again. And I'm covering that tail, by the way. So basically we're working a blanket stitch. So create a little loop, go in through the center of the ring, come up above that little loop you created, and work your blanket stitch. Now it's usual with Dorset button making to work your stitches so that the ridge of that blanket stitch forms at the top of the ring, and then we turn it aside later. So you want to cover the whole ring. Once you've covered that tail a little while, you can go ahead and trim that to keep it out of the way. You want to cover the whole ring, and you want it to be quite close together. You don't want any of the ring showing if you can help it. Trying to keep my fingers out of the way so it doesn't look quite so graceful as it, or quick as it would be if I was just working it as normal. And so there's the ridge at the top so that you can get an idea. So I'm going to carry on and cover the whole ring. The ring is now completely covered in stitches. I know that I won't have enough thread to do the next section, so I'm just going to show you a finishing off technique. Whenever I cover a ring, I always thread through and take the last stitch through the first. If you've run out of thread, now's a good idea to do a little bit of weaving as well. Make sure you stay near the ridge because you're going to move the ridge, and then this way it won't show. And that way you can hide the end. Now the next thing to do is to slick the edge, which is to take that ridge and push it to the back of the button. Now, because this was a wooden ring, the cotton thread is snagging a little bit on it and catching. So I'm going to use a slicker tool, which we have on our website. It's just easier than using your fingers. And basically you want to ease, in fact, if you start at your beginning and you want to just ease those ridges to the back, and you'll need to go around a couple of times just to take them to the back. Now obviously when you're working on a small ring and it's a metal ring, it just easily slips round to the back. I work my stitches very tightly as a normal practice, which means of course they're very tight on this wood, but it will go. It will go. Once it starts to go at the beginning, then the rest will follow suit. Now we have a nice clean edge at the front of the button. So I've threaded a needle singly, and I've got a very long length of thread at the moment. And I'm going to knot the other end. And again, when you're working small, if you have enough a thread on your bobbin, you don't need to do this. You don't need to change at this stage. Spin my button mold round to the back, and again, working with the ridge that we created, I'm just going to take the needle under there, and I've got the knot. The knot is going to be at the inside of the ring, okay? It's less likely to be seen then. And so you just want to make sure that's in. If you're a little unsure of your knot, or you're using a slippy thread, go ahead and put it through a second time. Just wrap it around the ridge of your blanket stitch. I need so much thread when I'm working large. It's a little disconcerting. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to wind the spokes. Now for the Swanston button, you need to have your spokes that are multiples of 3. So we're going to go with the sort of traditional, which is laying 12 wraps for 24 spokes. How do you get those even? One way is to just eyeball it, and the smaller that you're working, the easier it is to eyeball it. You could, however, use a wheel or a template and mark off divisions. If you're marking off divisions, on a small button, I would recommend using a chalk. On the larger buttons, or these decorative pieces, you can of course always use a heat erasable or air erasable pen. I'm using a heat erasable. If anything shows, I can always go over it with the hairdryer. And you can just mark out your divisions. You can, as I said, you can do this by eye as well, or you can lay down, and this works with smaller buttons, and then you lay over a grid, and that will help you to line up. Okay, so I'm just going to mark these. I'm going to have to move this out of the way so that I can mark it up so I can be exactly above it. So I've basically marked out little dots, and I've only worked halfway along. So because you only need to lay sort of halfway and you'll have double the amount of spokes. So I'm starting from the top, and that's where my first mark is. So I've went ahead and made a mark correspondingly below. So then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 marks on that half. I started going this way and I thought, nah, I won't bother. Okay, so you come down the back, straight up and around. That's your first wrap. So that's 1, 2, and each time you gently rotate, just turning the ring, and try to make sure that your spoke is in the middle of that space. So there I have 12 wraps for 24 spokes. So a spoke is from the center out. Now what you need to do is take the other end, and you need to join the top and bottom spokes. Now obviously, again, with such a large ring, it's not going to work out quite as nicely as it will with something small, but basically come up in between spokes and go back down, pulling in as much as you can. This one is a little too thick to be able to really pull in. But I'll be able to get a bit of purchase. This is also the place where on a small button mold you can tweak a little bit by pushing your spokes into place as you put down these securing cross stitches. I think that's pretty good. That should keep everything pretty neat and tidy. Now again, this is where if you want to change color, you can do so. But I like to put a little knot. I'm going to go straight the way through and come back up, because this is such a large ring and a large space that I'm working at. I'm just coming up in exactly the same place just so that I can put a little knot here. You don't have to do that, but I like to just fasten that. It helps to stop those threads from slipping, I find. And it's quite nice when you're working with a small button to just do a little stitch through that center part, only at the back, of course. Here are our spokes all laid out properly, and now we're going to start the actual design. Many people get confused with this design. It is actually quite straightforward, but it's difficult to work small because it's easy to lose your place. So you have to think about what you're actually doing and where you're working. So we're going to work basically rounding back stitches, which is the normal stitch that you would work for a Dorset button, with a slight difference. So I'll bring my needle up from the back. Our first stitch has to come back, but back over 2 spokes, not 1. Next, we'll move along, and this one will be back over 1 spoke. So the normal way for a Dorset wheel. And then 2, so we'll come back over 2. So of course you have to move forward 2, and then forward 1. Well, it's actually forward 3 because you're going underneath 3, back over 1. So let's say that in another way that might help. So I'm at the 1, I'm going to go under 3, back around 2, under 3, back around 1, under 3, back around 2, and so on. Now you need to do this for 2 rows. Now you can probably just about see, but the pattern will not emerge for quite a few rows. So we've got 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So now we need 1. And this is where it's difficult on a small button to necessarily keep track of where you're at. So there is the first row. When I'm working with something so big especially, I like to tweak and make sure that the first row looks as circular as I can make it. What I didn't say is when you're going around these spokes up and down, you should be going right the way through to the back spokes. It may not have been clear because this is such a thick ring. You can't pull in the top and bottom spokes quite so easily, but for this design you should wrap around the top and bottom spokes. Right, so now I'm going to do a second row, and that's going to be in exactly the same way. So over 2 at the same 2. So there's our 2 rows. Now for the next row, we need to step along. So don't worry that you would normally sort of work this spoke. Just basically move. So where there's 2, I'm going to come up at the single wrapped spoke and then back over 2, so that basically it's going inside of the pair that we wrapped in the first 2 rows. Okay, so we're wrapping now the next 2 along. So that will be 2 and then 1. And then 2 and then 1. It doesn't matter which direction you choose to move to step along. I've gone in towards my left. You could go towards your right. Just remember to do the same direction every time. Otherwise, the pattern will never emerge for you. And so again, full circle. Now I'm running out of thread, so I'm going to show you a method of changing it off. With this particular large button, it's pretty easy. I can just take the thread through at the back so that it doesn't show. With smaller buttons, there are different ways of working, and I have actually included a video. I'll pop the link below. I've already done a video on different ways that you can add threads. For this particular button, I am just going to very simply add basically at the back underneath. I'm not too worried because I know that I'll wrap these through. So it's just added up. I went through down there because my needle is not going to, this ring is so fat, it's a little awkward using the needle. If you wish, go ahead and tie that into a little knot so it doesn't slip out as you're working. So that's our third row. Our fourth row has to be in exactly the same place as our third row. So basically you're going to work 2 rows. You're going to work over rounding back stitch over 2 over 1 for 2 rows, then step along and repeat. And that's where the pattern will emerge. And then we have 2 rows having stepped along. And so now we need to step along again. So we'll do that in exactly the same way. I'm coming up over a single, coming back over 2, which will be in between the pair of the previous row. And again, just carry on. And so this is how you work the pattern. And there is the finished giant Swanston button. I've just basically fastened off at the back. I fastened off at the edge because this button is so large I could. But if I'm making a small actual button, I will bring the thread underneath and fasten at the middle. I just personally think that looks a little bit tidier. When you're working small, you can get some really nice crisp designs, and the pattern can really emerge nicely. This one with the ring worked in a different color to the filling stitches. And of course the one I showed at the beginning with a single color to really let the pattern pop. You'll find instructions for this and all of these in my book, Dorset Ring Buttons, which is available on my website. I'll pop a link below, and we do have some overseas stockists as well. So thanks very much for watching. I hope that solved the issues that I know that some of you have had with the Swanston button. Do please click like, hit subscribe, and don't forget to click that notification bell so you'll be told when I next upload a video. And until then, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.